Few moments in English history have been more hungry for the future, its mercurial possibilities and its hope of richness, than the spring of 1603. At last the old, hesitant, querulous, and increasingly unapproachable Queen Elizabeth was dying. Nowadays her courtiers and advisers spent their lives tiptoeing around her moods and her unpredictability. Lurching from one unaddressed financial crisis to the next, selling monopolies to favourites, she had begun to lose the affection of the country she had nurtured for so long. Elizabeth should have died years before. Most of her great men, Burleigh, Leicester, Walsingham, even the beautiful Earl of Essex, executed after a futile and chaotic rebellion in 1601, had gone already. She had become a relict of a previous age, and her wrinkled pasteboard virginity now looked more like fruitlessness than purity. Her niggardliness had starved the fountain of patronage on which the workings of the country relied, and those mechanisms, unoiled by the necessary largesse, were creaking. Her exhausted impatience made the process of government itself a labyrinth of tact and indirection. The country felt younger and more vital than its queen. Cultural conservatives might have bemoaned the death of old values and the corruption of modern morals, largely from Italy, conceived of as a louche and violent place, but these were not the symptoms of decline. England was full of newness and potential, its population burgeoning, its merchant fleets combing the world, London growing like a hothouse plum, the sons of gentlemen crowding as never before into the colleges of Oxford and Cambridge, plants and fruits from all over the world arriving in its gardens and on its tables. But the rigid carapace of the Elizabethan court lay like a cast-iron lid above it. The Queen's motto was still what it had always been, semper eadem, always the same. She hadn't moved with the times. So parsimonious had she been in elevating men to the peerage that by the end of her reign there were no more than 60 peers in the nobility of England. Scarcely a gentleman had been knighted by the Queen for years. That drought of honours was a symptom of a kind of paralysis, an indecisive rigidity. None of the great issues of the country had been resolved. Inflation had transformed the economy, but the Crown was still drawing rents from its properties that had been set in the 1560s. The relationship between the House of Commons and the Queen, for all her wooing and flattery, had become angry, tetchy, full of recrimination. The old war against Spain, which had achieved its great triumph of defeating the Armada in 1588, had dragged on for decades, hemorrhaging money and enjoying little support from the Englishmen whose taxes were paying for it. The London and Bristol merchants wanted only one outcome, an end to war, so that trade could be resumed. Religious differences had been buried by the Elizabethan regime, both Roman Catholics who wanted England to return to the fold of the Roman Church, and the more extreme, hotter Protestants, the Puritans, who felt that the Reformation in England had never been properly achieved, had been persecuted by the Queen and her Church, fined, imprisoned, and executed. Any questions of change, tolerance, or acceptance had not been addressed. Elizabeth had survived by ignoring problems or suppressing them, and as a result England was a cauldron which had not been allowed to boil. Later history, even in the 17th century itself, portrayed Elizabeth's death as a dimming of the brilliance, the moment at which England swapped a heroic, gallant Renaissance freshness for something more degenerate, less clean-cut, less noble, more self-serving, less dignified. But that is almost precisely the opposite of what England felt at the time. Elizabeth was passé, decayed. A new king with wife, children, Anne was pregnant with their 6th child, an heir for goodness sake, a passionate huntsman full of vigour, a poet, an intellectual of European standing, a new king, a new reign, and a new way of looking at the world. Of course the country longed for that. Elizabeth's death held out the prospect of peace with Spain, a new openness to religious toleration, and a resolution of the differences between the established Church and both Catholics and Puritans. more than we can perhaps realize now, a change of monarch in an age of personal rule.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.